Can certain environments speed up the decomposition of biodegradable bags? So this was a GYAR by Stella and Elin. And so in this presentation, I will present my peer review of their GYAR. What is being researched? So they are researching how biodegradable bags, plastic bags, decompose in different types of environments. So they will mainly look at how fast or the rate of decomposition in the environments of yogurt, manure, soil, and salt water. And this topic was chosen to investigate the effects of the different types of new products that have arisen due to climate change, they write in their text. And their hypothesis is that manure is predicted to decompose the quickest, as it has the most bacteria, or they believe that it has the most bacteria out of the samples that will help with the decomposition of the plastic bag. And similarly, they also believe that yogurt will be the second fastest, as it also has a lot of bacteria. So, on to the method. So, for the method, one circular piece of bio bag and two circular pieces of wire mesh were cut in accordance to these embroidery hoops. The plastic was then placed in between the two layers of mesh, almost like squishing together a sandwich with lettuce in the middle, of course. And it is then fastened in one of these embroidery loops, if I understood it correctly. The axis is then cut off, and this is replicated for 4 different samples in total. So for the different environments, 5 deciliters of yogurt is poured into a container. They specifically state the measurements of most of these, although not really the brand, which might be useful sometimes, just to give you already a bit of feedback. Then the embroidery sample, the embroidery loop, is placed into the container, and then 5 deciliters of yogurt is poured on top of it. This step was also repeated 3 additional times, so there will be 4 plastic samples in the yogurt in total. And for the manure and soil, 20 deciliters of manure and 10 deciliters of water was mixed together thoroughly, and then the embroidery hoop was dug into the soil or the manure, also making sure that it was perfectly horizontal rather than all wibbly wobbly or something like that. And also pouring the manure or soil on top of it. This was repeated 3 times with separate containers for each. So the same was true for the soil sample, except 15 deciliters of soil and 7.5 deciliters of water was used instead of the 10 deciliters of manure and 10 deciliters of water. And these were also put in separate containers without a lid. And then the salt water, 10 deciliters of water was poured with 2.5 tablespoons of salt and mixed until dissolved. Then the one singular embroidery hoop was placed into the mixture. The last hoop was also placed into an empty container as a controlled sample. And how will it be analyzed? Well, once every month for 4 months straight, they will dig up a sample or pick up a sample, and these samples are then placed in water for a couple of minutes. The dirt and residue is washed off, and this water is then run through a 2mm wire mesh. The wire mesh is left to dry for 24 hours. And when dry, the plastic is weighed and recorded. They also observe the texture and color, which I assume will be done through photographs. Why this method was chosen? The 4 different containers for manure, soil, and yogurt were chosen as to not contaminate the samples after putting it back. So, for instance, when it would be drying, bacteria would be able to attach itself to the plastic bag and therefore contaminate it. The same with the water. And why the different amount of samples were used? Well, manure is less dense, therefore more was needed for a similar volume. In the actual report, they state the overall objective was to try to fill the containers to roughly the same level, and therefore different amounts of each environment was used. That was water used for manure and soil, and this was to make it easier to go through the mesh and then actually touch the plastic bag. And so what they've done already is that they have started work on their introduction and hypothesis. They have also almost finished working on the method, it seems. And however, they're also at large missing their theoretical background and also their evaluation, which they can sort of, their evaluation you can start already, assuming you know some of the things that are almost doomed to occur. The theoretical background you can start basically whenever. And the group also stated what they would do next in a small section in their peer review document. And so the group plans to research more about plastic bags and their effects on the environment, the composition of the biodegradable bags, the effects of the constituents' effects on the environment, and also include descriptions of the bacteria that are present in the environment. So they're currently waiting on their first sample to finish, so therefore they have not had the ability to analyze anything yet. And some general feedback, I found no problems whatsoever really with the language and the grammar. It was very easy to read and most of the time easy to follow. The structure, I think, was not really following the guidelines really correctly. For instance, or how you would analyze the sample after why the method was chosen, which isn't really compliant with the guidelines set by the GYAR website, which I once again would highly recommend checking. And in terms of general clarity of the not only the method but the report itself, I think it was clear to read and the titles you had were okay, but I still would like some more subheaders, and I highly recommend more images, as you currently don't have any images whatsoever, as this would really make following your method easier and generally the report itself much easier to actually follow. So some of my concerns with the report so far were that the salt water might not fully replicate the sea, which I assumed that your saltwater sample is supposed to simulate, and this, as you probably know, is that the ocean has a lot of microorganisms that aren't really present in like just adding salt to water. However, I understand that it's maybe a bit hard to go out to the sea, get the water, and then come back. This is also much more difficult to control. Similarly, you don't really mention where your dirt or your soil is from, or the horse manure either, which would be really good to actually determine and make sure that you know where this came from. You also have a yes or no question for your research question, which wouldn't really be recommended, as your discussion can tend to be rather one-dimensional, really. As you would simply be answering a question, yes or no to a question, rather than, for example, like to what extent, or similarly. I think the best so far was probably your method. You had a very controlled environment, taking the temperature, making sure that it's consistent throughout the entire experiment, having all the samples in the same room, although it might mix some of the bacteria, potentially, maybe. In general, the controlled environment was, I think, very good. You also had a controlled experiment by just having a biodegradable plastic bag in fresh air, nothing else. I would also maybe want you to discuss the alternatives to biodegradable plastic bags, for instance, fabric bags, if these are more efficient or if they are not. So what can you do already? Well, you can flesh out the theoretical background, as I already hinted to, and then once again, it's really easy to just add these tiny details. For instance, adding a title page, adding page numbers, just adding an appendix but not really writing anything there, just starting to write on your subheaders, starting to create table of contents, just these tiny details that just make it look so much better, so that you can feel better about yourself and then become motivated because of it. But in conclusion, I think if you just keep up doing your work, just keep up doing the quality of work that you've done so far, and add these small tiny details that I've already mentioned, then you will have a very good piece of research and a very good GYAR in front of you. So I really wish you the best of luck with the project.